A little boy of 13 was on his way to school. He heard a crowd of people laughing and he went to take a look. Thousands were listening to the stories of one man. He spoke with such wisdom, even the kids could understand. The hours passed so quickly, the day turned into night. Everyone was hungry, but there was no food in sight. The boy looked in his lunchbox at the little that he had. He wasn't sure what good it'd do. There were thousands to be fed, but he saw the twinkling eyes of Jesus, the kindness in his smile, and the boy cried out with the trust of a child. He said, "Take my 5 loaves and 2 fishes, do with it as you will. I surrender. Take my fears, my inhibitions, all my burdens, my ambitions. You can use it all to feed them all." I often think about that boy when I'm feeling small, and I worry that the work I do means nothing at all. But every single tear I cry is a diamond in his hand. Every door that slams in my face I will offer up in prayer. So I'll give you every breath that I have. Oh Lord, you can work miracles. All you need is my amen. So take my 5 loaves and 2 fishes, do with it as you will. I surrender. Take my fears, my inhibitions, all my burdens, my ambitions. You can use it all. I hope it's not too small. I trust in you. I trust in you. So take my 5 loaves and 2 fishes, do with it as you will. I surrender. Take my fears, my inhibitions, all my burdens, my ambitions. You can use it all. No gift is too small.
Mary, help of Christians, pray for us. In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. Good morning, educators. This is Tina de Guzman from Don Bosco Press, Inc. Welcome to SalesianaBooks Chalk Talk Online. By now, you must know that SalesianaBooks Chalk Talk Online is a teacher training program that Don Bosco Press provides for its partner schools. So, despite this pandemic, we continue to move forward and make most of this challenging situation. That is why we are now bringing to you Chalk Talk and making it online. Thus, we now call it Chalk Talk Online. It's another Saturday morning, and we are on the third episode of Curriculum Design in the New Normal series. Today, we shall learn effective online instructional strategies and content. This is going to be another enriching morning for everyone. So I will no longer keep you waiting. To formally welcome you and introduce our speaker, may I call in the Executive Director of Don Bosco Press Inc., Brother Carmelo Martinez, SDB.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ma'am Tina. Good morning to all of you, dear participants, to this Chalk Talk Online series brought to you by Don Bosco Press in partnership with the Curriculum Studies Association of the Philippines. We are happy to welcome you to this learning session this morning. To begin with, I am putting up a poll asking you, how are you this morning? Thank you for responding to that poll. Okay, around, yeah, 40% of our participants this morning are feeling glad, and the same is true with those who are motivated, around 40%. We acknowledge too that there is a small percentage of our participants this morning who feel sad. So we just stay on with the feeling, and hopefully the session this morning will help in improving the sadness that you feel perhaps. Okay, thank you there is also a good number of participants this morning who are feeling inspired. Okay, thank you for answering our first poll. We are now on our third installment of the series on curriculum design in the new normal, and we are here again for another interesting discussion with our topic this morning: effective online strategies and content using an instructional design model. I have another poll for you to answer. Just checking it out. What will be your main task, main responsibility this coming new school year? So are you a classroom teacher? Are you an area head or a subject coordinator or a school administrator, a researcher? If your answer is others, we would appreciate it if you could identify what these other tasks could be in the chat box. Okay, thank you for I think uh, among our participants, we are really well distributed. We have classroom teachers, we have area head and subject coordinators, we have school administrators here, we have non-teaching personnel, we have graduate students, we have college professors, we have researchers, and there are those participants who identify themselves with tasks under the others. So thank you. We are grateful to Dr. Ami Fajardo for journeying with us through this series. We appreciate the effort and the love that she puts in every session. Nagsiself-recording pa siya just to be able to come up with a truly substantial and enriching session every Saturday. We thank you too, our dear participants, for your active participation and involvement during our every discussion. We are all learning a lot from the input, but also from the questions that you raise after the input. We hope that attending this session becomes our habit for the next 2 more Saturdays. And in case you might have missed the previous sessions of this series, we are glad to inform you that they have now been uploaded in our YouTube channel. Just type Don Bosco Press and you'll find it in the playlist. Please feel free to use, share, or download them. We will be very happy to know that you find them useful. I have one last poll for this morning. Just asking where you might be right now. Okay. Though a good number of our participants this morning, around 60% are coming from NCR, we welcome as well our participants from regions 1, 2, and Cordillera Administrative Region. We have representations from Region 3 and Region 4 and Bicol Region. We also have participants from Davao and Soc Sargent. Also Central Visayas, Eastern Visayas, and Northern Mindanao and Caraga. And we have also from outside the country. Thank you so much for answering that poll. And so, without further ado, let us welcome our speaker this morning, Dr. Amelia C. Fajardo, Associate Professor at the College of Education of the University of the Philippines, Diliman, Curriculum Studies and Teacher Education Area. Friends, let us welcome Doc Ami.
So, part of it, I'm good morning, everyone. I have no choice. Sorry about that. So they asked me to do it live now, but I'm afraid because there are certain documents that I want to show and I cannot upload it. So I would request them to perhaps go back to that only part of the video as soon as they have fixed it. I think the reason why the sound was very poor when I recall when I was recording, I forgot to include the audio capture. So I'm sorry about that. So can I ask them to move the slide? So okay. So for today, we're going to have the review of first part, I'm going to review what we had last time about webinar 2. Two main areas that we touched about, which we touch on, were curriculum mapping and the reverse curriculum mapping. So next slide, please. I showed you, this is one of the slides that I presented last time, showing the alignment among the different learning intent. And so when we say learning intent, it can be the aim, goal, or objective. So these three are all related and they should be aligned. So any curriculum program starts with the intent, which is drawn from the vision mission of the school. Then from the vision mission, we get the aim. At the end of the program, what should be the result, no? That's our target. And then the aim are translated into goals, several goals. And the goals, each goal is translated to different objectives down the line. So if all the objectives are achieved, then we are assured that the goals are achieved. And if all the goals are achieved, then we are assured that the aim is achieved. And we are contributing to the vision mission of the institution. Next slide, please. Okay. And to make sure that there is an alignment, we do the curriculum map. The process that is involved in curriculum mapping is the task analysis propagated by Dr. Robert Gagne. So when we do the task analysis, we try to identify the sub competencies or the tasks that would ensure or would define particular learning competence, and then the goals, etc., etc. And this is, I showed you how to do that using the Bloom's taxonomy, which has 6 levels. No? The highest is the creation, which is the 6. And I emphasized last time that before you reach the 6, you have to go through the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And to recall, level 1 is about remembering, level 2 is understanding, level 3 is applying, 4 is analyzing, 5 is evaluating, and 6 is the creation. So if the learning object or learning intent is creating, then you have to develop competencies related to evaluation, analyzing, applying, understanding, and remembering. The first 3 are referred to as the low thinking skills, and starting from the 4th up to the 6th, these are the high order thinking skills. So depending on what courses are you teaching, the level can differ. So, so using that task analysis, we try to align. If the goal is creations, and there should be competencies that would include the lower 5, and that would ensure alignment. So the curriculum map tells us that all the learning intent are aligned. Next slide, please. And this is the aerial representation of the process. So starting from the vision mission, we try to identify the characteristics of our ideal graduate. And based on the characteristics, we formulate our program goals, which actually belong to the higher level. It should be level 5 or 6. And then we identify the indicators, or these are the subtasks that would define the program goals. And we convert the indicators into course goals. And then the course goals are used to identify the instructional objectives and so on. So following this process, this is the assurance, no, that the alignment is there in the product. The next slide. Okay, so the previous slide tells us what happens when you develop a curriculum. Now, when we do the unpacking, the curriculum is already present. So the first thing that we need to do is try to see whether the course objectives that are given to you, that you need to achieve in your course, are aligned with the program goals. So this is your task. You don't just immediately design and convert it into specific instructional plan, but make sure that the objectives you're trying to achieve in your course are really aligned with the program goals. So we do the reverse curriculum mapping. So starting from the course objectives, you try to see whether the course objectives are aligned with the program goals. Okay, and they are actually aligned with the vision mission of the school. So when you teach a course, you are not myopic only looking at your course, but trying to see how your course is related with the other courses to achieve the program goals. Okay, if there are things that need to be if you identify some of the course objectives not being aligned with the program goals, I think you need to sit down with your colleagues and try to figure out how you can realign those objectives. Then once this is done, then you can start formulating your lesson objectives. So this is the first step when you do the unpacking. Okay, I am assuming that you know how to formulate a very good, well-formulated lesson objectives, the SMART one. Okay, next slide, please. So why do we do the reverse curriculum mapping? It helps us in determining the alignment, as I mentioned. I keep on repeating this. And then it also helps us determine what should be changed, revised in the learning intent without actually compromising the set program goals. So in our redesigning process now that we're doing in the University of the Philippines, the program goals are non-negotiable. We cannot change the program goals. All the program goals that we have in the different programs in the university have gone through the process of approval up to the Board of Regents. So these are the program goals that are aligned with the demands of the industry, needed by the community. So this is non-negotiable, and also the course objectives are non-negotiable too. So we can tweak the learning objectives to make it more relevant. If we find some that are not relevant, then we tweak it. But definitely we cannot touch the course objectives in our case and the program goals. And the reverse curriculum mapping also helps us identify which learning intent can be removed or integrated with other learning intent. No, if we want to compress, especially now that the number of days to cover the curriculum has been reduced, as we reduce it to 13, 5 weeks less than the normal. So we try to look at the course goals which can be integrated without compromising the program goals. Okay, next slide, please. So we are now in the process of translating the intended curriculum, which I have tackled in webinar 1. So from the curricular guide of DepEd, for example, we want to design courses, and that's part of the unpacking. Okay. Some Americans don't like the word unpacking because it's too colloquial, but I told my colleague it has been in the literature in curriculum way back in 2010 or earlier. So what are the processes involved in unpacking? It's actually instructional design, and I included the reverse curriculum mapping. So what is the product of the process? So we should be able to come up with instructional plans that are aligned with the intended curriculum. So we use the intended curriculum, we open it up, use it as a guide in making our instructional plans. So there should be a connect. If you remember what I told you in webinar 1, I said the implemented curriculum should be should be an approximation, or it's a very close-up estimate of the intended curriculum. So you don't make instructional plans that are not based on the intended curriculum. Otherwise, there can be a problem. No? You can be inserting lessons that are not essential, and that can cause overlaps with the other courses, especially if your course is taken at the middle. Okay, next slide. So there are a lot of models in unpacking or instructional designing, and I chose Deacon Racer. This is very rational. And you can identify, even if you don't have a model in mind, maybe this is a very logical step. You have heard about UBD, or Understanding by Design. That is also an unpacking model for instructional designing. It is not an approach to teaching. It is a model for unpacking. Now, why did McTighe, and just to give you an insight, why did Wiggins and McTighe decided to come up with a procedural theory on unpacking? Because most of the standards released in the United States start with the word understanding, which is not clear. No? When do you say that one has understood something? So they said, if you interpret the word understanding, they can have a lot of interpretations. No? And how can you measure or assess the level of achievement if the beginning, the standard is not clear? So they use UBD as the process of defining what they mean by understanding. Okay? So that's the story behind it. So when it was introduced in the Philippines, and when I heard people say, "Oh, we have obidized the instructional design," and they're referring to the approach, it's not an approach to teaching. It is a curriculum, an instructional design model. Okay, but I'm not going to use it. But some of the schools, they still use it. It's also nice. It's also good as long as you know how to do the process. So in the Dick and Racer instructional design model, we have done the first one already in webinar 2. And in his model, the next step should be the planning of activities. But I inserted the selection of content, right? Just to make sure that the topic or the subject matter that are reflective of the objectives that we want to achieve. Okay, and then after that, we have the planning of activities. And then it's only Dick and Racer that introduced the step on choosing the media. So what media can be used, no, to help you achieve your objectives. This is one of the steps, which I'm not going to deal with. So this model is usually used by many online developers, online course developers. Okay, next slide, please. So what are the criteria in selecting content? There are 5. In the literature, some would have 7, 6, but the commonality are these criteria. And so we have validity. The content should be valid, significant, it is interesting, has utility, has useful, and it should be learnable. Okay, let us define each one. Next slide. So validity is in reference to the authenticity of the subject matter. So it should not be obsolete anymore. So one example is when you teach computer, you don't teach typing anymore or typewriter because there are no typewriters anymore. Nobody's using typewriter nowadays. They don't even, the young ones do not even know how it looks. But the basic concept. So the validity just means to say it is updated. Okay, the updated topic or subject matter. Significance refers to the importance of the subject matter or content to the development of the learning competence. So this is very important. When you talk about learning competencies, it tells you what are the knowledge, skills, and attitude that are related to the competence. So if you say the learning competence is being able to swim 100 miles, so what are the knowledge that you need to include in your lesson that would help the learners swim after a certain period? Okay, so all competence would have the 3 inclusions: knowledge, skills, and attitude. Well, swimming is, sabi nila, it's psychomotor. Yes, the focus is psychomotor, but there is a knowledge component behind swimming. So depending on the subject matter, sometimes, but most of the subject matter would deal with the cognitive competence. But for every cognitive competence, there's the corresponding psychomotor and values, affective dimension of the competence. Interest, okay? This is based on the nature of your learners. Students learn best if the subject matter is meaningful to them. It becomes meaningful if they are interested in it. So for me, I stopped teaching undergraduate students because I think they're already my grandchildren and I cannot be relevant to them. So there's a generation gap. I don't know what's interesting to them and what's not interesting to them. I tried to go back to undergraduate teaching 5 years ago or 7 years ago, and it was really a struggle. My children are no longer 17 years old. They're all grown ups too. So it's really hard for me. Can you imagine? No, so I, how do you say, I appreciate and I admire um, 50s older faculty members teaching kindergarten. They can be the Lola, but I cannot. So this depends on the knowledge of your learners. So you should know what is interesting to them. Next. Next slide, please. Yeah. And then utility. It has to be useful to the student. Okay. And I think this is the problem with mathematics. So people, the students would always think, or me, for example, or some of my colleagues before, and some of my classmates in the undergrad, they chose a subject, a course which has no math, only math 11, 14, 15. They say, what? Where will I use the knowledge in mathematics if I have to memorize all of these numbers? So it's, where is it? How will I use it? And so because mathematics is taught as theory, and why is Singapore math very popular? It's easy because mathematics is very abstract, and I think Singapore math attempts to uh, relate the importance of the mathematical topics to everyday life, so the learners would know how this knowledge or competency would help them in their struggle, everyday struggle. Okay, learnability. The subject matter or content must be within the schema of the learners. Now this is very important, especially for those competence that have prerequisite competence. Um, so sometimes, or most of, it's not sometimes, it is a fact that according to the cognitive theory, we form all everything that we learn. We try to arrange them into schema in our brain. So if the information has been assimilated in the long-term memory, there is the retrieval. So certain competence cannot be learned because the schema, the prerequisite, or the schema that to which your new learning can be anchored is not present. Okay, and that happens in a lot of cases because the prerequisite knowledge are not present. So no matter how good you are teaching a particular concept, you have to go back. And I think I met a lot of teachers saying to me, Mom, we have to redo the teaching of this concept, the prerequisite concept, because it was not learned in the earlier graduates, in the earlier years. So we have to be sure, no, that the content that you're teaching, the students have already developed they already have the prerequisite competence for it. Okay, next slide, please. And this is the part where I want to show you as a very simple curriculum map which I did, no, based on the DepEd curriculum guide on science. I took an excerpt. And this is part of the video. That's why I want the recording, because I can put the slide not in PDF file. But let me see what I can do. Can I still upload this? Okay. So what you can see it's not the linear because when I converted the Excel file to PDF, it became linear. So what you see is just the first two columns. So what I did, no, I don't know if they can make it bigger so you can see what I did. And this is a very simple mapping of based on the curricular guide. On the left side, the grade levels, nawala siya. Okay, the one on the left are the grade levels. So grade 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. The second column is the performance standards, which I took from the curricular guide for each of the grade level. Okay? So, dapat katabi niya yung susunod. So, pakitaas niyo po ulit. Can you move it to the next page? Yan. Okay. So, dito, you can see the learning competencies. This should be the right beside the performance standards. So you would know if the learning competencies in the curricular guide are enough to be able to say that the performance standards are met. No? Ito yung simple mapping na ginawa ko po. And then beside this, there is another column which I placed. Pakitaas po natin. Yan. Tapos dito po, nandito yung, hindi yan, madam, yung susunod pa. Yan, this is the content. These are the content drawn from the curricular guide. Ngayon here, in the Excel file that I used in the recorded video, I made some certain insertions. I tried to revise because I found out that it's not really spiraling. Nakakalungkot kasi you start with grade 3, ito yung part ng human body. You start with grade 3, practice healthful habits in taking care of the sense organs. Pero kulang yung learning competence. No? So kahit natutunan nyo, na-achieve mo yung learning competence yun, hindi pa rin marunong mag-practice yung bata ng healthful habits kasi may kulang. Tapos dito sa grade 4, sabi niya dito, construct a prototype model of organism that has body parts which can survive in a given environment. That's the performance objective. No? Ang learning competency, describe the main function of the major organs. It doesn't say about human. Wala pong human organs ito. Kasi marami namang body parts eh. In a given environment, a model of an organism. So it's not referring to the human body. Pero nakalagay dun sa kanyang content ay human major organs. So may disconnect. Ang content niya, human major organs of the body caring for the major organs. So dapat ang inilagay niya dito sa kanyang performance standards, not prototype model of an organism. Dapat may human dito, human body. Okay po? So marami pa po akong nadiskubre. Tapos nadiskubre ko na walang competency on human organs sa grade 7. And they lumped everything in grade 6. No? Lahat ng human organs system like musculoskeletal, integumentary, digestive, circulatory, lahat nasa grade 6. Sa grade 5, dito itinuro na yung reproductive organs. So sabi ko, wow, may reproductive organs na dito. Hindi mo na sinama yung paano yung pagkain, circulatory, paghinga. Kasi kung gagawin itong lesson na to, dapat may inclusion tayo ng COVID-19 no, dito to make the content very much relevant and updated so that we can help the students understand the current pandemic. So, pwede tayo magkaroon ng integrated lessons, or we can use the COVID-19 as a springboard for discussion. So, I'm showing this, which is very important part of the unpacking. No? Pag ako yung gumawa po nun, I will not be just contented with developing the lesson kasi ito'y nakalagay sa curricular guide, but I will try to achieve the performance standards, but make it better, identify the gaps, no, and to make it holistic. Ito po yung sanang ginagawa, and I think I don't like to preempt, but this gave me a challenge, no, very challenging to me as a curricularist, because I said maybe our organization can make a difference. So we will try to launch a very big project, mapping out the current curricular guide and trying to identify some of the gaps that we need to address. So this is volunteer. We don't have money for it, but we have our commitment and dedication to improving. It's high time that we give back to our country. I don't think it's too late, but we can do something. We can do something a little. If you want to be part of it, you're very much welcome. Okay, so let's go back to the slide. Yeah. So I am reading some of the comments as I will send you we will upload the Excel file, which I did about it, no? So, okay, Dr. Philemon, we will try to upload it. I know the letters are very small. So sorry po about that. But in the recording, I make it big. And it's the Excel file. Okay, so we will now go to planning the activities. So how do we plan the activities? And there are a lot of terms that you can see in the literature. You have the learning experience, you have the teaching learning strategies. The learning experience refers to the total engagement of the students in your class, which can run from 40 to 60 minutes. So that's the total. Teaching strategies. Next slide, please. I refer. Okay. So, I want to react. Magre-react lang po ako. I agree with Dr. Gar. The teacher should enrich the curriculum guide. Yes, but we don't solely depend on it, no? Tama po yun. We have to enrich it, or we have to make it better. But it is still the basis. So that's why we want to do the curriculum mapping, because we want to not really enrich or make it aligned. May alignment lahat ng elements. So make it cohesive. Pag dinescribe po namin sa curricularista, we say it has to be basic. The curriculum should have balance, articulation, scope and sequence, integration, and continuity. So if all the elements are aligned, then the curriculum is basic. It has balance, articulation, scope and sequence, integration, and continuity. Okay? So we try to contextualize, no, because these are just learning objectives. We try to contextualize in our instructional objective. So, sa totoo lang po, I would like to publicly express, no, way back when I was doing my dissertation, it is all about community-based curriculum development, because I don't believe that there should only be one curriculum to be implemented in all the different areas of the Philippines, considering that there are very varied community. So one curriculum cannot address the unique educational needs, the relevance and responsiveness of it, no, to the needs of the learners in the community. Education should help improve the lot of our students. So yun po. Parang sa America, they just have the standards and each particular school will have their own way of interpreting the standards. But still, there is the core. So ayoko naman ng walang standard. Meron pa rin. Because the standards would define what the country needs in terms of citizens. What kind of citizens do we need? Okay, so let's go to the side. That's why I don't like the live because I talk so much. So the teaching learning strategies. I would like to borrow the definition of Derek Meader. It is the instructional strategies. They all include always activities that a teacher may take to actively engage students in the learning process. These strategies drives teachers' instruction as they work to meet specific learning objectives. So ito po yung ating tools, no? Tools that we use to achieve our learning objectives. So dapat yung learning objectives, tama na yun. Pag natama na natin yun, pag-iisipan naman natin, paano natin matutukoy ang ating adhikain para sa asignaturang yun. Susunod pong, please. Next slide, please. So, I would like to show you the spectrum. We all know that there are a lot of teaching strategies that would fall under the teacher-centered, or we call it the direct instruction. And there are also examples of teaching strategies that are student-centered, and or the extreme would be the individualized instruction. Next slide, please. Yan. So these are just a few of the many teaching strategies, and I think you are all familiar with this. Direct instruction would be the one-way talk, like what I'm doing right now. Yung lecture, and ang assumption the teacher is the main source of the information. So if it's online teaching, the materials would be the one giving the instruction. Then you have the discussion. The teacher still holds or controls the flow of the discussion. This is the big group discussion. Then you have the small group discussion among your students. Then you have the cooperative learning, problem solving, strategies, role playing, case studies, individualized instruction. So there can be a lot of variation for each one. I was able to come up with a document that lists down 150 teaching strategies, but these are very simple, like visiting a restaurant, use of video, it's 150, all sorts. So which means there are a lot of things we can use in our environment, in our house, in our school, which can help us achieve our goals. Okay, next slide, please. Now, why did I decide to include this, yung learning pyramid? And some say it's not valid because the basis daw for the percentage is not clear. But even then, I would just like to show you how much of what is being shared is remembered by the students. So if you lecture less than 10% daw, so konti lang ang naaalala. Then when they read, 10% lang din daw ang naaalala. If you use audiovisual materials, 20%. If you do demonstration, 30%. 50% daw if you have discussion. 75% pag practice. They practice it, they do it. And if you ask your student to teach one particular part, they remember 90%. So this is the basis why in my classes, I ask my students to teach or take care of one lesson. No? Not because I am lazy to teach. Because some schools do not like that. But before they can teach a particular part of my lesson, they have to submit to me a lesson plan. What will they do? How will they teach? Or how will they report? So I don't like reporting where they will just read their notes. They have to design the lesson. I think it's very helpful so they can also develop their organization skills. So it's harder for me to check the materials and give them suggestions on how to make it better in class, what other documents they need, than me lecturing. Okay? But I told them they can be a specialist in one particular aspect of the entire syllabus. So they remember this. And sure enough, they remember it better because they study. You cannot teach something which you do not know. You cannot share something which you do not have. Okay? So it depends on how you do the reporting. Okay? And there should be guides also on how they will be graded and assessed. So, what does this particular learning pyramid is based on the principle of experiential learning. The more senses are involved, the better you retain the knowledge. Yun po ang ibig sabihin ng retention. So, when you do the lecturing, the most active sense is the hearing. So, yung seeing, pwede, pero pag nakapikit ka at nakikinig ka sa teacher, isa lang ang gumagana. The stimulus is just entering your ears, sense of hearing. Kaya minsan madaling makalimutan unless you are an auditory learner. Okay? So, tapos pag nag-practice, syempre mas maraming senses ang involved, mas naaalala. Kaya pag nag-field trip ang mga bata, lahat, buong kanilang katawan ay involved dun sa field trip. Madami silang naaalala. Kaya, kung hindi makalabas, dali ng laboratory sa loob ng classroom. Learning by doing. Okay, next slide please. What are the selection criteria? Okay, this will just help you guide. Of course, the most important is the learning intent. What do you want to achieve? No? What is the most effective strategy that I know to help me achieve the learning intent? Then, even if you have thought about it, are the resources available? So, sabi, wow, naisip mo, ang ganda-ganda. Pero, bakit hindi ko siya kayang gawin? Kasi wala akong resources. Hindi ako pwedeng, wala akong video. Karamihan to problema sa maliliit na eskwelahan kasi very limited ang resources. O mag-iisip ka ulit. O sige, huwag na lang yung strategy na yan. Ano pa kaya yung susunod? Mas magandang strategy kasi wala akong available materials. Tapos yung susunod, knowledge of the strategy. So, nabasa mo sa libro, you have read in a book, oh, ito magandang strategy to use in this particular content or achieving the learning intent. However, you're not familiar with the strategy. So, if you're not familiar, it will be very tragic. Promise po yan, tragedy yun. Will not be feeling comfortable about the use of that strategy. So, sometimes you need more training to implement certain strategy. Kung hindi kayo familiar with the strategy, kahit po yun yung nakalagay, it's better to use something that you're familiar with. And then next is the time. Yung time naman po, minsan ang haba ng strategy would entail a lot of time, no? Time consuming. 40 minutes lang ang kailangan, matapos mo yun. So, kailangan mag-isip ka. Kung masyado mahaba, then think of another strategy. And then, yung nature of learners. At sino ba yung mga estudyante ko? Okay ba na magpa-game ako kasi ang tatanda na ng mga estudyante ko? Okay ba na pakantahin ko sila para silang kindergarten? So, knowledge of your learners would help you identify what strategies would fit them most. Okay? Next. Okay. May virtual toolbox po ako na nasa slide, pero i-upload ko ngayon. Pasensya na po kayo. Hindi ko alam. Talaga po sigurong sabi nga nila merong dahilan ang lahat. So, I cannot slide na lang. Ayan, okay. Ayan po. Ayan po yung aking nakita. So, kasi sana relevant ako sa inyo dahil I'm talking about things the face-to-face. But even then, no, I can, how do you say, this one, yung face-to-face classroom. So, ito yung po, we do the lecture, ano yung counterpart niya sa online? Siguro pwede nating palakihin. Pwede ba itong palakihin? Hindi, Anyway, babasahin ko na lang po para sa inyo. So, online classroom, pre-recorded presentations, yung katulad ng ginagawa ko, with screen recording software. And for webcam, pwede ring live sessions using video software. Ito yung lecture, or you can have the web pages, share documents, and other media. Tapos yung isa naman, yung learning resources and handouts, pwede pong YouTube, Vimeo, and other third-party links, file uploaded and shared via the learning management system that you have, or shared through email or shared drive. Tapos yung isa po, teacher to student communication. You can do the communication by email or chat, instructor announcements, discussion assignments, and quiz feedbacks. Tapos meron pong student to student communication. Ito, alam na lang estudyante yan. They can have the chat, the email, they can have online. I think the students can identify the means, no? You can also have group work, which they can done offline, or online discussion boards. I have seen this in the Open University. They have the Blackboard. Then group discussion using chat or video software. And then you can have the office, ano pong tawag dyan? The office hours, your consultation period. And then the scheduling, you can have shared calendar and application. So these are some of the tools that you can use when you do your online. Okay, another part is the strategies for teaching with social media. That is the next part. I don't know if they can upload it, but that's the second part of the video. So in this particular slide, I showed the whatever platform, the platform that you can use for different purposes. So pag sa live streaming, pwede gumamit ng Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Snapchat, Periscope, tsaka ito pala yung mga social media na available. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Snapchat, Periscope, and WhatsApp. Hindi po ako familiar sa TikTok, nakikita ko pero hindi ko pa nagamit. Snapchat, hindi ko pa rin po nagamit. Periscope, hindi ko pa nagamit. So, ang nagamit ko pa lang, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, at saka WhatsApp. WhatsApp, it's also a messengering app. So, meron din pong Line. Tawag po nila doon, Line. It's also a messenger app. So, pag pumunta kayo sa ibang lugar marami silang messaging app, message app. Yun na nga ba yun? Anyway, so for live streaming, you can use Facebook, Instagram, and Periscope. For lessons, instructions, pwede nyong gamitin lahat except Periscope. I don't know why. Tapos yung instruction feedback and question by text, you can use all except YouTube and Periscope. Tapos you can also have online open educational resource sharing using Twitter and Facebook. Then group work, you can use Facebook and WhatsApp. Topic-based communication, you can use Twitter and Facebook. Community building for institutions, you have Twitter, Facebook, and Snapchat. Okay, we will try to, ayan, pakishare daw yung slides. Sandali po si-share ko. Okay, ito po yun. This is the PDF file which I was able to download from Pearson, the virtual toolbox. So ito po yung sinasabi ko kanina. Ano yung ginagawa natin for online. Tapos ano yung mga pwede nating gamiting social media. Assuming that our students have access to this, no? So yan, may Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Most of the young people would use these three famous, the Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. So for live streaming, pwede tayong gumamit ng Facebook tsaka Instagram. Tapos ito, for lessons, pwede din po yun. Instruction feedback, ayan, except this. So, upload po namin to for you to have a copy. So, marami po tayong pwedeng gamitin. Ngayon, alam niyo po, hindi ako techie na tao, but because of the need, no, for me to be relevant and to reach out, I have to study. Remember, during the first webinar, I have very poor internet connection. So, we tried to do a lot of dry run, pero talagang I cannot get into it. So, we have plan A, B, and C. So, yung plan A, kung okay yung internet, yung plan B, kung voice lang, yung plan C, nagre-record. So, because I cannot rely on my internet connection, I did the recording first time. And I really was a loss. Ninenervous ako na paano ko i-record yung aking lecture, tsaka hindi ako komportable na nagre-record ka na walang kausap. Anyway, so I tried to search, meron palang OBS. It's a free software, open broadcaster software. Dinownload ko yun, and then I went to YouTube. I searched for a tutorial how to use the OBS. I was able to find one, very simple, and I did it. So, it was trial and error. I clicked, nagbabasa naman ako, but it's very logical. Anybody can use it just for recording. But if you do live streaming, usually they have facility for live streaming naman. So you can automatically record using Zoom when you do live instruction or synchronous teaching. You can record your lesson and upload it so that the students can have access to it, especially those who were not present. Okay po? O yun, pwede rin ng live streaming ang OBS. Open broadcaster software. It's free. You don't have to pay. You can also do some editing, which I don't do. I let them edit whatever I have. So, itong last recording, I failed to put on the audio capture, kaya mahina yung boses ko. Video capture lang pala yung nandun. Kaya pasensya na po kayo. Baka talagang kailangan kong gawin. But one thing good about the recording, sometimes we do 3 times, 2 times, I want to revise the flow of my talk. Okay, so next slide. So we have talked about the different tools that we can use in terms of strategies. Next slide, please. Nasa slide na po kami. Ako, mag-uusap kami ni Michael Raymond. Strict po ako sa klase, pero sometimes mabait. Okay. Ngayon, the tools are just tools, no? They are valueless. They are neither effective or ineffective. So we cannot just say lecture is ineffective. It depends on how you use it. So the final challenge is really how to arrange all of these tools into a design. So I would like to introduce the term instructional design. Instructional design is actually in reference to the set of events that happens in the classroom that you expose your learners to. So you don't just go to the classroom and then start there, okay? Today we're going to talk. May technique eh, may design yun. From the moment you start until the end, there are certain steps and we call it instructional events. So instructional design is composed of several instructional events. So how do we determine this? We determine the events, no, based on certain theories of learning. Ano ba sinasabi ng theories? What is the best way for a students to learn? Okay? So may basihan po yung mga events na yan. And I'll show you some of the models. So, sasabi rin ni Ganye, it is also essential to point out that the exact form of event is not something that can be specified in general for all lessons, but rather basis only. No? The basis is the learning objectives. So sinasabi ni Ganyo, although he has 9 events, it doesn't mean na ito na yung susundan mong sequence. No? Ito na yun. Pwede mong baguhin. You can change. But he was expecting that you have all those instructional events in your design. Okay, so remember, instructional design is composed of instructional events which are based on particular theories of learning. Okay, next. Now, examples of instructional models, there are a lot of them, but I would like to introduce few examples, 4 examples based on a particular theory. So you have the Madeline Hunter instructional design model, the Gagne's 9 events of instruction, the Dick and Racer instructional design model. So Dick and Racer has both the process, how to determine the elements, and also the final product, what should be the instructional events in the instruction. And then you have the 5 E's instructional design model, and I think DepEd has been using this in some of their subject matter. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this one I have to emphasize. Now, whether, regardless of the models, all instructional design has common elements. So lahat may introduction, may body, and closure. But how to introduce and what are the elements of the introductory part would vary from one model to another. How to do the body is also different from one model to another. And then how to close. Okay, so dapat lahat meron yan. Yung iba, pag mali, pag hindi tama yung pagplano mo, nakukulangan, nawawala ang closure. The closure is very important part of instruction. So if you manage your time well, there should be the closure, because it will try to summarize and give the idea to the students how far you have gone or how far you have reached in terms of achieving your objectives for that particular lesson. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so let me show you the Madeline Hunter. Oh, can you kindly tell me if you want to have a template for Madeline Hunter lesson plan based on Madeline Hunter? So we can include this in the handouts. So I can have a listing of the things that you want me to share with you, and we can upload this and make it available to you the next webinar. So kay Madeline Hunter, if you notice, there are 7 steps, 7 instructional events. You state the objectives, the anticipatory set, which is actually the motivation part, and the input of modeling, check for understanding, guided practice, independent practice, and closure. So, ang introductory portion niya, itong dalawa. Stating objectives, and then starting from input to modeling hanggang independent practice, this is the body, and then the closure. So, this is very behaviorist. This is based on the behaviorist theory of learning. Okay, so you start with the objective. Bakit? Because the students would know what to expect in that particular lesson and what should they be able to do after the lesson. So there can be a self-assessment. Okay, next slide. So for Ganye, there are 9 events starting with this one. Ito, tama ba? Gaining attention, provide learning objectives, stimulate recall of prior knowledge. Tapos you present the content, provide learning guidance, elicit performance practice, and then provide feedback, assess performance, enhance retention and transfer. So, sabi ni Ganye, this event should be in the lesson. So it's very cognitivist because there is the recall of prior knowledge. You try to identify to where the new competence or new information can be hooked up to, so that it will facilitate the movement of the new information from the short-term memory to the long-term memory. The problem is, if there is no prior learning, hindi natuto yung bata. Tapos eto na yung sumunod. So, wala siyang ihuhook, mahihirapan. So, babalikan mo ulit yung prior learning na kailangan nilang malaman. Okay, next. Dick and Racer, sa kanya, he has only 6 events. Motivating students, informing students, helping students recall prerequisite. Behaviorist siya, pero nung dinagdagan niya ng recall prerequisite, parang magkaroon ng semblance of cognitivism. So these 2 are part of the introduction, or maybe until here. This is the presentation body, and then summarizing the lesson is the last one. Okay, next slide. Yung 5 is, no? Yung 5 is, it means engagement, you explore, explain, elaborate, evaluate. Now, this is very constructivist. You engage the students, so you elicit certain problems. Ginagamit po ito mostly sa science, pwede rin sa math or even social studies. You engage them to stimulate the expression of their prior learning or whatever knowledge they have about the topic or about the lesson. And then they explore more about questions, because based on what they recall, they know, you would be able to identify that some of their knowledge is not really the same as that of the experts' knowledge. So the lesson would try to correct this, no? So they explore by themselves, they try to do it and find out the real principles. Then they have a chance to explain. So napaka child-centered, and they try to explore and extend more, and then do the evaluation of their own experience. So this is a very time-consuming uh, instructional design, but very effective. So, hindi po lahat ng lesson pwedeng gawin ito kasi kalahati lang ng curriculum ang pwedeng yung gamitan nito dahil nga if properly done, it's very time consuming. So you have to reduce the number of competencies that you need to cover or you need to achieve or develop. So you can use this from time to time, but not almost every meeting or every lesson. Next slide. Okay. Ngayon, meron po akong I looked at a lesson plan na i-upload ko ngayon. Gutom na ba kayo? Malapit na ang lunch. Yan, niloload na nila. Ayan, ito po yung lesson plan. Siyempre, hindi ko sasabihin kung saan siya galing. No? Kasi magagalit siya sa akin. So, ayan. Gustong-gusto ko po ng lesson plan na horizontal. O ganyan. Kasi nakikita ko paano ina-achieve itong objective na to. Okay? Ano yung part ng introduction. So, ito bang ginamit yung strategy appropriate para dito sa objective? So, yan, meron siyang recognition ng number, pero meron siya ring video. So, dito sa kabila, remember I told you in webinar 2, no? Kailangan, yung curriculum kasi natin parang pang face-to-face talaga eh. Hindi ka mag-uumpisa sa wala. So, meron na tayong nagawang mga instructional plan. Babalikan nyo lang. Tapos, sa isang side, ako naglagay po nito. Binago ko yung kanya, nilagyan ko ng remote learning. So, based on this lesson, how will I migrate, no? And make it remote learning. So, naglagay ako dyan ng asynchronous. Nilagay ko doon, I will ask the students to watch the video by themselves and then I let them answer the guide questions. So, ito parang part ng part ng recalling what they know, what have they have understood. Kasi iniisip ko yung video dito would be more stimulatory, drawing questions from the students rather than information. Tapos, ito na yung body niya. Yung body niya, naglagay din ako dyan, processing of the asynchronous activity to introduce the topic. So, dito sa main part, dito ko na nilagay, how do I design the synchronous lesson? Na nandyan, naka-zoom kayo, ito, zoom ko na rin gagamitin ko. So, paano ko i-introduce yung, ito na yung aking script, ito na yung guide ko. So, magre-recall muna kami ipaprocess ko muna yung, i-introduce ko muna yung topic based dun sa asynchronous activity. Tapos, I will explain the objectives for the lesson, and then the activities will do, and the activities that the students will do in the lesson. Tapos, each group will share, so may grouping. Do sa Zoom, pwede kang magkaroon ng specific rooms where they can go, and so group mo sila, papasok sila dun sa loob, and then you give the activities. And then the teacher process ulit. So, all of this you can record, no, while doing the Zoom meeting. Pwede mo siyang i-record. So, hindi pa rin nawawala yung design. Nandun pa rin yun, of presentation of objectives, no? And you have to manage how can you do the discussion Meron namang button board doon. Pwede ngayon nga, dito nga ngayon, may question and answer. Meron kayong chinachat, then which I can read and I can react to it. No? So, may ganon. Ang importante kasi sa instruction, whether it's face-to-face or online, is the communication. Communication of the ideas. Ang mahirap sa online, the non-verbal cues you cannot see, which you can immediately see in the face-to-face. So, medyo, may problema ba kayo? Ano yun? May ganun eh. Pero sa online, wala yun. Pwede nga silang mag-off ng video, hindi mo na alam kung ano mangyayari. But these are things that we have to address. Nakakatakot kasi hindi ako trained for online. Ang training ko is face-to-face. Okay? Meron din cues. The students also would know kung face-to-face, kung ako ay medyo naiinis, facial expression, I'm very transparent. Yung mga non-verbal cues, mahahalata mo sa body movement, which you cannot see when you do the online or even the synchronous video watching. So, eto po yun. So kapag, I hope I'm not late, when you do the remote learning, and I hope this is what you do, kunin niyo yung lesson plan nyo, na-check niyo yung learning objectives, okay yung content, tapos ito, tignan nyo. And then, how can you translate that to online teaching? So, you can divide, well, it's asynchronous. You have to decide. Ano ba sabi ng eskwelahan nyo? May synchronous ba kayo o purely asynchronous or blend combination of asynchronous and synchronous? Okay, let's go back to the slides. Malapit na po. Promise. Okay, my personal ideas and thoughts about this, no? I already mentioned this. Our curriculum is meant for face-to-face modality. So when we migrate to online learning, we think that we need to simulate as closely as possible the face-to-face. So eventually, we will go back to face-to-face. This is very temporary. But let us take advantage of the opportunity to still continue teaching and making our efforts effective by equipping ourselves with some of the tools that are available to us. So when the first pandemic that happened in 1918 or 1920, the Spanish flu, everything stopped, even the schools. But, you know, we are very lucky now because we have the advantage of using a lot of technology which can help us continue with our task of education. Now, for me, kahit naman nung araw, kung walang technology, hindi ibig sabihin walang natutunan yung tao. Kasi education doesn't only happen in the four corners of your classroom. When you go out and experience something, you can educate yourself too. Ngayon, ang hirap nga rin maging teacher kasi if you teach the content, no, not the competency, if you teach the content, you can be irrelevant to your students because the content, they can just Google it, go to YouTube, as I did with the OBS, and find out ways. But the most important thing is making them be information literate. What do I mean? Not everything that they found published online are worth reading. So they have to be very critical. Which videos are really telling the truth? Which video should I follow? Kasi marami ng fake news eh. So marami rin din tayong videos na hindi naman totoo o hindi naman latest. So kailangan maging critical. We have to develop among our students the competency of being critical. And they have to know how to evaluate materials for learning, like you and me. Okay? Tapos, the next thing you should know, how much of my instruction can be delivered synchronously. So there are 3 types of mode, fully synchronous. So every time you meet, there's a scheduled lesson and you continue with your, like as if you are in the face-to-face classroom. Yung blended, you send the materials to them. They go over the materials and then they go back, like what I did, the asynchronous. So part of the lessons are asynchronously done. The students go to the assigned meeting time synchronously. Yung fully asynchronous, everything is printed or out. There is no scheduled meeting. There is no scheduled synchronous classes. So, kailangan meron to ang availability, and this can be determined by the availability of technology. So, this is a very big problem in the public school because you cannot reach out. So, they're using the television and the radio. So, yung television is one way they give the information. I don't think the lessons are designed in such a way that it's really the lesson recorded, but I'm not really sure. But if that is done, no, as if they are recording a lesson, it can also be very limited. Some of the activities cannot be done by the students because materials may not be available in their homes. Okay, so this is very important to help you design. Next slide, please. Then the question on how to ensure student engagement. So communication is very important. Communicating the expectations and the structure. So like face-to-face, online learning should also have clear structure and expectation. And this will keep your students engaged because they know how it is designed, they know their expectations from them, and they know how to deal with these expectations. So even in face-to-face, diba, we have set rules that they need to follow. If you come 15 minutes after the scheduled time, you're late. You have to be quiet. Okay, you should not disturb. There should only be one person talking at any given time. These are my rules. But sometimes graduate students forget my rules. Anyway, we have set clear expectations and norms, and you have to help students connect among themselves outside of the virtual classroom. Next. Okay, now what are the key information that you need to convey? Ito po yung very basic. Pag nagbigay kayo ng email sa kanya, welcome to the course, blah, blah, blah. We are using this platform, etc. Then how to log in. If you can have the link, you will tell them how to get into the classroom. Then how do they submit their work, the outputs, how to get technical support, then how do they communicate with you, chat ba, email, no? Sa akin, if it's very informal, you can chat me. But if you're submitting something, you have to submit it through email. Because I won't read anything if it's in the chat. The chat is for informal communication. For me, that's my rule. Then how can they communicate it with their classmates? If and when you will hold virtual office hours, kailan ng consultation. Because any modification to the work expectations or exemptions they can expect based on the virtual environment. And what to do if they have extenuating circumstances. You can just tell them you will have link to the recorded lessons. Ngayon, don't tell them that the lessons are always recorded. Baka hindi na sila mag-attend ng lesson. Tapos tignan na lang yung recording. So you only give access to the recording to those who were absent or those who miss certain points, no? And for valid reason. Then where they can find resources online. Okay, next. Expectations and norms. Ito po. You have to have clear attendance requirements with instructions on how to communicate absences. Use of webcam during sessions. No? Yung ibang mga bata, ako, pag nag-a-attend po ako ng meeting, papakita ko lang yung mukha ko dun sa colleague at the start of the meeting. And then after that, wala na akong video kasi kinakain yung malaking bandwidth. ngongo na lahat, no? Hindi na rin ako makakarinig sa kanila. So that's my reason. So it depends on who your learners are and the capability of their tools, the rules on mute and unmute. Maybe you can unmute the audio para hindi nagkakarinigan. Tapos violations of the rules, what are the consequences? Then how do you entertain, how do they post their questions, and how do you answer the question? And then grading or non-grading of synchronous sessions is, then you have to be very clear about it. Okay, next slide. I think that's the last slide. Okay, so let me leave you with this saying to emphasize the importance of having your students be involved. Tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn, by Benjamin Franklin. Okay, have a nice day and I'll be entertaining questions. Parang wala pa nagtatanong. O wala na kayo. Nandiyan pa ba kayo? Okay.
Hi, Doc Amy.
Hi.
Yan
Hi.
po. Isa na naman pong nag-uumapaw na Sabado. I'm sure the audience are still digesting what they have heard, but before, as we are still waiting for some questions from our participants, let me just announce that the handouts from the previous episode is now can now be downloaded in the handout section, while the presentation that was presented today will be available by next session. Okay, so you make sure that you to attend the succeeding lessons. All right. So as we are still waiting for some questions, let me just show my appreciation for my takeaways for this morning as well, Doc Amy. So totoo po yan that we are really considering so much just to make a good instructional material or instructional design. So first, in the selection of the content, totoo na yung validity, significance, interest. Pero what struck me, ma'am, was the utility talaga. Because I was once a math teacher, so I agree that students are really looking for the usefulness of what we teach. So laging may meme yan pag math teacher. Saan ko ba gagamitin yung mga equations na yan? Because they find it hard to study, but they don't find meaning to it. So as teachers, we are really challenged how we try to make our students see how useful what we are teaching them. So, yon, challenge yan. Kaya dapat talaga, as teachers, we are creative that's innate to us, and we really have to be relevant and versatile so that we look for ways how to equip ourselves and translate the learning intent that we want the students to have. Also, dun po sa selection criteria ng learning strategies, yun nga po. Maraming strategies. Ito, ang dami na naman nating ideas. But at the end of the day, sabi nga ni Ma'am, ni Doc Amy, what is the most important is the learning intent. So, and we also have to make most of what we have. Admittedly, nung mga first year of teaching po, parang ang goal natin is to really equip ourselves. Dapat maganda yung strategy ko, ganyan. Pero dapat din talaga i-consider, at the end of the day, kung effective ba yung strategies for our students. Totoo
Okay.
yun po. Maraming magandang mababasa po ng strategies, pero kung hindi naman
Hindi mo kayang gamitin.
Sa'yo, yes. Mararamdaman ng students yun eh.
Correct.
Tama po. Sasabihin nila, ay, may observation kaya ginalingan na naman ni ma'am, pero yun, parang ganun. So our end goal is really to achieve the learning intent.
Meron tanong dito si Miss Phoebe. Would it be a good practice to get their consent to record the online? Yes, I think mas maganda nga, tama, no? I agree with you and I thank you for reminding me. You have to have an agreement. Maybe they can have all of them signing, and if you are dealing with under ano tawag dito, hindi
Data
adults, so,
privacy
o
also.
yung bata pa talaga, even the parents should be asked if they would allow the recording of the sessions every time. Thank you very much for reminding me this. Tapos, gusto ko lang din i-point out sa inyo, uh, giving the materials doesn't translate to learning, no? Kahit basahin nila. The most important thing is your intervention as a teacher. How do you process yung binasa ng estudyante? Kaya nga tayo may guide questions. And there are a lot of rules which the basic principles when you ask them to look at the video, you have to give them guide questions so they would know exactly what to focus on. If they ask them to observe, what do they need to observe? Something like this. Hindi siya exploratory palagi. And then, you have to process yung mga observations ng bata. Yun yung role. Otherwise, kung walang processing, mag-resign na tayo as teacher. Kasi yun yung role natin. Lahat naman ng content pwedeng basahin ngayon, no? Matututo ka na. Anong gamit mo as a teacher? The most important thing is the processing. And there should be sharing of things that you know that cannot be read. And that's your value as a teacher. If you would just ask them and depend on a book, isang libro, basahin nila, anong added value mo as a teacher? Eh di, babasahin ko na lang yung libro. Wala naman pala eh. Sasabihin din ng estudyante, naku, basahin mo na yung libro kahit hindi ka pumasok, okay na, mababasa. Wala nang added value. So, yun, ang hirap, actually, mas madaling mag-lecture because you hold your time. Masabi mo lang, wala kang pakialam kung nababasa o hindi, o naiintindihan o hindi. Meron akong colleague noon. I have 30 students. They have to adjust to me. I will not care whether they learn or not. O, yung filosofiya niya yun. Pero ako, hindi. So, di ba? Ganyan yung filosofiya niya eh. So, sige. Pero hindi ibig sabihin nag-lecture ka, natuto yung mga bata. They can have 100, you can have 100% scores on your examination. But those information are just stored in the short-term memory. When they go out, there's no retrieval because it never went to the long-term memory. Nothing to retrieve. But after so many years of taking biology, for example, 10 or 15 years na, naaalala nyo pa yun. Ay, ito natutunan namin. Ibig sabihin, natuto ka talaga kasi nat-retrieve mo yung information na yun after several years. So it was in your long-term memory. Okay po. Wala atang tanong. May tanong naman kayo. Meron.
Ito po, we now have question from Sir Eduardo N. Sanchez Jr. So, ma'am, slightly tangential. Is there a simple assessment to determine if your students have an adult mindset or not? I work with a lot of 20-somethings who are not adult when it comes to learning mentality.
Okay.
Ito po. Kasi my question relates to determining instructional design.
Design to employ. Yan. Nako, pangalan yan.
Si Sir Eduardo.
Well, yung ano na ba tayo ngayon? Gen Z? Gen Z na ba yung 20 years old? Gen Z na yun. Ano? Hindi ko alam eh. Pero, nako Sir Ed, itong mga 20s na to, talagang mga bata ngayon, hindi, wala silang pangalan nito, mindset pa of an adult. They may be 20 years old, but I think the mentality and definition natin of being adult is not the same as how they define an adult and sense of responsibility. So, pag nagturo, well, you can experiment on some of the instructional design, which can be effective to them or not. Or maybe you can have more engagement. You give them a lot of activities where they can really be engaged and be responsible for their own learning. I always tell my students in class, I can only give so much. It is a partnership. If you cannot contribute, they also have to contribute to their own learning and they should be responsible for their own learning too. Okay? So if you do not like to learn more than what I'm giving you, then it's up to you. Diyan hihinto na ako, okay? Yan lang gusto mo, iyon lang. Yan. Mabait ako eh. Kung ano gusto mo, binibigay. But if you request something more, then I can give you, but depending on what you're requesting. Kasi yung iba kasi, magpapa-advise sa akin, but actually, they're not bringing anything. Sasabihin na, ma'am, ito po. Sabi ko, saan ako magko-comment? Ano po gagawin ko? Ba't ako tinatanong mo? Ano nga ba dapat ang gawin mo? They are just picking my brain. It's not fair. Sabi ko, kung ako magsasagot niyan, edi ako na magtitisis, hindi na ikaw. Taray, no? Kaya nagugulat yung iba pag recording eh. Hindi talaga, Okay. Next question.
All right, from Ma'am Jacqueline A. Galang. Good morning, ma'am. Is there a way by which we can prevent students copying or having the same answers on a given activities?
Nako. Well, it's inevitable that they will have the same answer. But having the same answers does not mean that they are copying from one another. No? Yun yung aking sagot doon. Mahirap sa online malaman. Pero kung nyari, nagpagawa ka ng essay, hindi niya yung pwedeng kopyahin kasi mga small questions lang yun. Then, ano na nga pangalan niya? Miss Jacqueline.
Yes po.
I think kung nangopya siya, ano yun eh? Pag nangopya yung estudyante, nalaman mo, pwede mong kausapin yung dalawang may parehong sagot, pero on separate occasions, just to determine whether they really copied or not. Kasi we cannot assume na kumopya dahil pareho ang sagot. Tapos, this is just, I'm sharing to you how can I handle that, and then we can also have software check. Yung nag-check kung kinopya sa internet o hindi yung mga sagot. But small personal questions can be used. Yung mga, I believe in, tapos merong blanco. Kasi hindi sila pwedeng kumopya nun. Pwede pa rin kumopya. No? Hirap talaga kahit naman sa face-to-face nangungopya eh. It's their loss and not you, but I think you can emphasize the fact that there can be no wrong answer. Kaya natatakot yung mga bata at nangungopya dun sa mga tingin nilang matatalino kasi nga dun sa score. Pero iklaro nyo, ano ba purpose ng assessment? Parang yung purpose ng assessment is for us to determine if they have learned something or not. So kung hindi sila magiging tapat, hindi mo sila matutulungan, nahihirapan sila dun sa lesson. Okay.
Okay po. Thank you, ma'am. Next, we have from Sir Salvi P. Beloy.
Ayan.
Good noon po, Doc Amy. Clarification lang po. How do we address challenges in student decorum during online classes, considering that the curriculum is designed for face-to-face? Thank you po.
Salamat sa tanong, Mr. Beloy Salvi. Hindi ko alam eh. Joke. Kasi ngayon pa lang ako mag-online, face-to-face ako. Pero I would like to believe on what I have been reading based on the experience of online teachers talaga. No? So yung unang-una, kailangan, like I mentioned, you have to communicate clearly yung expectations and rules nyo in online. Na mag-mute ka ba, ganyan. So yung first day of session nyo, or you have to make a written document, or pwede siyang i-copy na ibibigay mo, and then you discuss that during the first meeting. Tapos may consequences yun, kung ano man yung decorum. So this is part of your students being engaged in the classes. Proper decorum, do you allow chatting between your students? Kasi they can also talk. Maingay din yun, di ba? Kasi maingay in the sense na nag-chat sila. Ikausap sila, hindi nakikinig sa iyo. So, will you allow that? Bawal. Pag nahuli mo, anong gagawin mo? So, yung LMS mo ba, yung learning management system mo ba, would allow you to detect those students who are chatting among themselves. And then what will you do? So, ang importante lang dito, Sir Beloy, just like in face-to-face, kailangan klaro yung rules mo when doing synchronous discussion or online. Okay? Next
Okay
po.
po. Next from Miss Marie Antoinette. Thanks, Doc Amy, for another worthwhile learning session. My question is, how much is learning styles of students considered in designing the
No.
curriculum?
We learning styles. Yung webinar 2, webinar 1, I mentioned about the learning styles, no? Which they think is, they're trying to debunk it, parang hindi daw totoo yun. Pero maybe you can say preferred learning style, but we can still learn using we can shift from being auditory to visual to kinesthetic depending on the situation. You consider the learning style in determining in the most effective teaching strategies sa akin. Kasi if it's true that 80% of your students are visual, then your teaching strategies should include a lot of visuals, no, para mas retention would be greater than auditory alone. Okay.
Okay po. We have one last question from Miss Meneria Nashad. Teachers send their learning materials to students for the 2 days asynchronous lessons. Can I ask for some practical tips what teachers can teach during the synchronous lesson, given the fact that students have already read and answered exercises during their asynchronous?
Okay. The asynchronous can just be parang siyang assignment, no, na binigay mo, they can go over. But as I mentioned earlier, going over the materials and answering the question doesn't mean that they have understood or there is really deep learning. So during the synchronous, you can discuss the answers to the activities and then add some more. Okay, you can have a chance to read the answers to the asynchronous activities. So you can plan which among these should I focus on during the discussion in the synchronous lessons. So it can be an enrichment or it can be a prelude to the next lesson. Okay, so ang ano dito, don't assume that going over the materials during the asynchronous lessons translate to learning. The students need you to understand the activities or the materials that they have gone through.
All right. There is a follow-up question po from Sir Salvi. So, what advice can you give to us so that it will be fair to students who are in modular mode of delivery as compared to online distance education, since students in online have the opportunity to interact in real time?
Okay. So yung dun sa mga complete, like yung lahat lang, no, learning materials pinapadala sa kanila. So maraming sitwasyon kasi pwede rin namang kung may pagkakataon, kahit sa telepono, kung may telepono sila, then you can talk with them, no? And go over the materials. Kailangan kasi may feedback pa rin, may feedback mechanism. So pag natapos nila yung isang module, pwedeng ibalik sa'yo, pwede kang sumulat sa kanya, mag-email ka sa kanya at may mga tanong, follow-up questions, and you can give extra materials. So mahaba man yung proseso, at least meron kayong communication. Ang sinasabi ko nga dito, yung modular mode, hindi naman talaga siya, you cannot even assure that there is learning that is taking place even if they have gone through the module. Ako, I tried Coursera, no? Coursera ba yan? Siyempre, hindi ko tinapos. Kasi ayoko siya. Hindi ako para doon. So, ito, kailangan natin maintindihan na kawawa yung ibang bata. They are stuck with all the material. So, dapat meron tayong means of communicating to them, whether online, telepono, pwedeng sulat, postage, o mabubuhay ang postal service natin, or LBC, pwedeng ganun. So, meron lang dapat communication. So, ang importante kasi yung role ng teacher is the processing of the input. So, dun sa module, wala. Kaya mahirap yung self-learning module na online na ibibigay, whether it's online or not, yung self-learning module. Kasi, kailangan ina-anticipate mo lahat ng reactions ng learners mo. Lahat ng possible question. And all the questions, possible questions that you have thought about, there should be processing in the self-learning module. Isusulat mo rin yun. So parang nababasa ka nila, naririnig ka nila habang binabasa yung explanation doon sa self-learning module. The self-learning module should serve as the teacher. But if the modules are not written in that way, then there's a problem. The teachers have to set in and process the answers to this question. Okay.
Alright. Thank
Wala
you,
nang
ma'am.
tanong.
Yan
Maraming
po po.
salamat po sa mga tanong nyo.
Yan po.
Ah,
May we ask for some final words to close this session, ma'am?
sige. Marami pong salamat for those who have been here today and even in the previous webinar. Share ko lang sa inyo when I was doing the recording, sabi ko, hirap pala maging artista kasi kailangan ko mag-makeup. But I have been learning a lot, no? In this process. I don't like to go out, medyo scary nga, but I'm also learning a lot from your questions, and I'm inspired by your commitment and dedication in making sure that you are learning, you are doing your responsibility, and your students are learning in spite of the pandemic. So we stay safe. Sana next time you ask more questions, because I think the questions are very inspiring also, and maybe there are certain things that I missed out, and it would help me explain and expound further. So I enjoy. Ay, may tanong pa eh. Ayun, ako. May tanong po si Michael. How can we adjust the instructional designs for students with disability? Nako, sir. Instructional design, it's like, if it's with, depende sa learning disability, but you produce an instructional educational plan for your students. And I think the same process follows, but more on, depende po. Kasi may mentally challenged ba yung mga estudyante, then it's also a different. I'm not an expert in special education, but depende dun sa disability. But you can still adjust. You can use the instructional design and address the disability. So if the students are visually impaired, then you have to have a lot of materials that they can touch and listen to compensate for the loss of sight. Okay po? May tanong pa po ba? I hope I answered your question, sir.
Alright.
Okay.
Thank
So,
you, ma'am.
marami pong salamat and hope to see you soon. Please spread the word so that we can have a bigger audience who would like to listen and be part of our Saturday date. So, God bless po at maraming salamat sa inyo.
Thank you po, Doc Amy.
Thank you.
Alright. We also thank everyone for sharing your Saturday morning with us. And please do look out for our next Chalk Talk online sessions. So we'll be seeing you again on next Saturday, August 29, for the fourth session of the Curriculum Design in the New Normal series entitled Effective Assessment or the Feedback Mechanism. And on September 4, a Friday, we shall be having the series with Psychological Association of the Philippines entitled Mental Health Program During Pandemic and Beyond. And we shall be having the last session for the CDNN on September 5, another Saturday, on implementation and monitoring. So we are hoping to see you on our next sessions. You may also see the updates of our Chalk Talk Online in our Facebook page. So please make sure that you press that like button. And of course, you may contact your SalesianaBooks account executives to ensure your slots. As announced by Brother Mello a while ago, you may also see the previous sessions of our other series in our YouTube channel. So you just need to search for Don Bosco Press and hit subscribe. Other reminders, for those who have registered for today's Chalk Talk Online, you shall be receiving your certificates in 2 weeks' time. And also, you'll be having a recording of this session through your emails. Lastly, please do accomplish the evaluation survey at the end of this session to help us serve you better. So again, thank you for joining us today at SalesianaBooks Chalk Talk Online. We hope to see you again in our upcoming sessions. This is Tina de Guzman thanking you, and until next time.
Quality education through quality textbooks.